So good afternoon, everybody. My name is Adam Smith, and it's my great pleasure and honor to be the moderator for this afternoon's session on the IMI in the European research area. And before we start, just one piece of housekeeping. If there's a Mr. Pessler here, he probably looks worried because he's missing his wallet. And it is being held at the registration desk, so he can look less worried now. Now, I should just introduce myself very briefly. I'm the Editorial Director of Nobel Media, which is the media arm of the Nobel Foundation in Stockholm, Sweden. But I have a background in biomedical research and publishing. And I've been a very keen observer of IMI from its outset. Back in 2001, I launched a journal for Nature called Nature Reviews Drug Discovery, which was an early advocate of the sort of open collaboration and information sharing that IMI seeks to promote so elegantly. And also I've had the privilege of being an official observer for IMI's calls 2 and 3, which gave me a rare chance to observe the process of putting consortia together and also, of course, many of the challenges of doing so. Now, this afternoon's session is dedicated to widening the focus of our discussions of IMI. This morning we've seen lots of presentations which have highlighted why neuroscience is such a perfect candidate for the sort of cross-sector collaboration that IMI can facilitate. Now we are privileged to have with us, at the moment 2, hopefully later 3 people, who can take a wider view of IMI, looking at it from the European Commission standpoint, from the industry standpoint, and from the standpoint of the European Parliament. I'm joined by Robert Jan Smits, who is the Director General for Research and Innovation at the European Commission, Richard Bergström, who is Director General of EFPIA, and we are shortly to be joined, we hoped, by Françoise Grossetête, member of the European Parliament, but because of the baggage handlers' strike at the airport, she is delayed. However, we're promised that she'll be here around about 3 o'clock. So on your programs, you'll see that she was due to be the first speaker, but we're going to shuffle the order slightly. And I'm going to ask Richard Bergström first to talk. Richard has a background in regulatory affairs with Roche and Novartis and was Director General of the Swedish Association of the Pharmaceutical Industries prior to becoming DG of EFPIA in 2011. Richard.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. There are unfortunately examples of EU-funded projects like highways that end in mid-air, bridges built that are not finished, airports with gates with no planes. This, I'm happy to say, is not such a project. The theme of my little intervention is actually going to be about making sure that when you build this highway, it goes all the way to the patient. And I think many of you have this in the back of your minds after this morning's fantastic presentations about there's a lot we can do now together in a place like IMI, but how is this going to work down the line? The next guy in line, the next regulatory agency, the next implementation body, do they get this? Are they ready? So I think this is, for me, a central theme for EFPIA and for the industry as we engage in IMI 2 in planning this, is that we take into consideration everything else out there so that this is not going to be that mid-air finished highway. So IMI is clearly a success story. As you heard, I've only been in Brussels for 2 years, but I've been on the board of EFPIA for a very long time, then representing Sweden, as you heard. And I was there that historical day when the EFPIA CEOs signed, it was more virtual, but still signed a piece of paper saying we commit to this. And not everyone was convinced further down in the ranks of the industry that this will be a good thing. Today, I don't hear anyone saying anything but that this has been a fantastic success, and particularly the types of calls we've seen lately and the ones we're contemplating now. IMI really has become the place where we connect the famous dots. It's a safe harbor for everyone to work with one another, people that may not trust one another or may not like one another, but they know that they have to work together. It's been tough. It's been very challenging to get going on some of these grant agreements. We've learned a lot. Certainly the office under Michel's leadership the people there have learned a lot about how you actually go between people and build trust and get going on real projects. And we see some very tangible results. Some examples of which you have showcased outside of the meeting room. So clearly it's a success story. Now let's take this into the bigger picture of our world. And as you know, my industry, our business model is that we continue to renew ourselves, we continue to innovate with varying degrees of successes. Companies have ups and downs, but largely I think you would agree with me that we've been very successful over the last decades in delivering new medicines and vaccines to patients. But this is not static. On the other hand, it's not revolutionary either, but there are changes happening big time in my industry. We see clearly how companies are turning investments from in-house investments to collaborative investments. And just the other week, I met with Robert Jan Smits together with my incoming president, Chris Wiebacher from Sanofi, who said, and I think he'd be happy that I quote him, he told Robert Jan that, we in the industry had this attitude that, no, we can take care of this. We don't need anyone. We have this green field, we build a research site, we put in 500 people, we give them a few billion, wait 10 years. Guess what? Nothing comes out of it. So we've learned that this sort of attitude of maybe we can do this ourselves individually is not going to work. This interest and even enthusiasm for open innovation in all its forms is absolutely compatible with our business model of having patents, getting a reward for successes. That reward is reinvested in innovation. That works. Open innovation is absolutely compatible with an IP-driven business model. But we need to collaborate with one another because this is simply too challenging, may not be working, some people would say, and in some areas, clearly it's the only way to deliver on the science. The R&D productivity is a challenge. It doesn't have to, you don't have to be a genius to figure out that if you invest 100 to 120 billion euros every year in research, and you get 20, 25 new molecules, that's pretty expensive per piece. And not surprisingly, prices of medicines reflect that. Enormous development costs. And we try to argue the value of each individual product when we price medicines. But beyond that, you all know that somehow this is about getting return for the investments. And the more expensive it is, the more expensive drugs will be. We must be open about that from the side of the industry. Now, it's also very clear, and that's why I talked about this highway, is that our regulatory systems and the healthcare systems are simply not ready for all this exciting science that we talk about. I must say the regulators, the regulatory authorities, the European Medicines Agency here in Europe, the Food and Drug Administration in the US, the leaders of these organizations and most of the people working there, they get this. They follow the science. I mean, they review clinical trial applications, they give advice to companies, they follow the science. But somehow they're stuck in legislation, they're stuck in a certain path. You need the randomized controlled trials, there are 2 of them, and then the bigger the better, the smaller the p-value, the better. You strive for perfection in a perfect population. But they know that this is not really working. But after the regulators, we have a whole new community of people. And these are the people that make decisions on healthcare investments. These are payers, we call them, pricing reimbursement bodies, health technology assessment bodies. Some of them see this, and some of them we have talked to. So we've brought them on this journey, but many of them not. And I think we in the industry, we've got ourselves to blame as well, because we didn't really bother to talk to these people about all the science. We were just hoping that they would pick up the tab one day. Now, that's not working. Now, we need to find mechanism for continuously engaging all these people. And fundamentally, of course, it's the patients that need to be there. They're the ones that need to tell us what they consider is the need or what's an appropriate benefit versus a risk ratio. So we have healthcare systems that are programmed to deliver in a certain way. We have the disease categories. You code to get paid by the insurance company or the NHS or whatever, you have to code that this is the disease. That's not compatible with these connectome maps and the maps we've seen on disease classification. So imagine the enormous reprogramming of healthcare delivery that needs to be done. Again, it's not from one day to another. It's not revolutionary, but it's when these therapies come, there needs to be a code, if you know what I mean. There needs to be a code for the doctor to get paid. There needs to be a code for biomarker. So there have to be, everything has to be sort of prepared for the new science. And you may think, well, what has this got to do with IMI? Well, it's got a lot to do with IMI, because this is about making sure that we bridge the science with the implementation mechanisms. And for us, this is at the core of our planning, and I'll show you a little bit more of detail along these lines. Also very interesting and encouraging is that there's huge interest around the world for public-private partnerships. There was a joint event. We had Michelle here at the airport with the US colleagues from the Critical Path Institute. There were FDA officials, NIH, the NIH Foundation. Real interest in IMI and real interest in if I call it joint programming then, at the European, at the global level, even between these initiatives. And I know Japan, the Japanese Prime Minister announced just 2-3 weeks ago that there will be a similar program underway in Japan, very much inspired, I think, by IMI. So we should take some credit for showing the way for our global partners as well. Well, I alluded to this. You know, is this R&D model sustainable? You're familiar with the very stepwise, very rigid way we've been doing things since the early 60s, actually. The whole regulatory system has been the same since 1964, 1965. No major changes since then. We've added a few things on top of it, advanced therapies, orphan drugs, but essentially it's the same stepwise development with one magic moment, approval of a product. And everyone's focused on that, and no one's really thinking about the fact that you may have to monitor medicines in the real life as well and learn more from real patients in real situations. And we may have to incorporate some of those tools in the early development. So evolution of IMI is that, that we have covered now basically all these steps. We have the regulators very much involved in throughout. It started primarily with the pure areas to the left of this chart. We've gradually expanded. We have both the FDA and the EMA fully involved in all the projects that are relevant for them. We try deliberately to involve all these other peoples like payers and patients. We have a lovely project proposal now for real relative effectiveness parallel to phase 3. It's called Get Real. I love the acronym. Incorporating some more pragmatic clinical trial tools already early in the development phase. So this has evolved, and as we now look towards, and it's interesting, by the way, then in this context, that many of the EU policies, which are sort of soft law policies, if I call it that, the Innovation Union initiatives, the various innovation partnerships, the activities on personalized medicine, all these things that are not legislative or regulatory, many of them in the space of health and life science, they are somehow making their way into IMI, which is great because that's where you can move things on before it's time to change the legislation or do something more dramatic to it. New pharmacovigilance tools we've added, also reflecting the need to focus on drug safety. The European legislation on pharmacovigilance, which was updated last year, or implemented this year actually now as we speak, is backed up by some very interesting projects in IMI. So this is not happening in a vacuum. It's happening increasingly in the context of the political world, which is not a bad thing. Because all the challenges I talked about with this highway is in the real world. We need to bring politicians with us. We need to bring healthcare systems with us on this exciting journey on science. So in a way, what we need in my industry, and many of you need in the research community, is a harmonious system. We need functioning ecosystems for continued R&D investments. And I won't go into the details, but you're familiar with this, the way of describing the innovation system, not as an arrow, but rather as a circle, where a virtuous cycle of continuous reinvestments, continuous learning, is what we need. And IMI cannot capture all of it. There's some bits that are missing here. The industrial policies for Europe, incentives for certain types of research may be missing. The market environment for us, okay, I won't go into that. But the things that can be covered by IMI certainly are covered by IMI. This is another way to see, how this evolution in thinking and evolution in design of calls has happened. And So for those of you that are maybe just a casual observer, if I say that, of the IMI evolution, there is something very thought through behind all of this. And that is to make IMI more relevant in the political world, and then also to make sure we deliver to patients. So we have now under development final stages of a strategic research agenda for IMI 2, which we hope will be finally approved by everyone that has to approve it. I hope Madame Grossetête can arrive and sign the check later today. But we're quite excited about this. There's no secret that we are pledging a commitment of much more than what we've committed to date from my CEOs. And we hope to wrap this up during the rest of the year, and I'm sure we'll hear more from Robert Jan later about this. But it's key, it's very important that what I described in the previous slides is reflected in this strategic research agenda, and that's why we are very explicit about addressing all these other needs as well, not just the scientific challenges, but also this delivery challenge, and also the challenge in the European healthcare context, where there is an increasing interest from ministries of finance and macroeconomists about making sure that we can continue to commit to the European welfare model, which means that people need to work longer, not be on sick leave longer. It's fine if we live longer, but it's good if you contribute to the economy. So suddenly there's this interest in maybe investing in health, maybe seeing health as an investment. Despite all the austerity gloom, maybe there is an appetite or an interest from finance guys for actually viewing health as an investment. So let's work on that. Now, at the center of this is an interesting piece of work which is being done right now, which is right in the middle of this one, is a new report coming out from the World Health Organization, sponsored by the European Commission, jointly, interestingly, by DG Research and Innovation and DG Enterprise, which has some of the responsibilities for pharmaceuticals. It's a report, update of a report from 2004, looking at what are the priorities, what are the needs, and what's the pipeline. And that's going to be an excellent platform. It's just the starting point for dialogue. If we don't have enough of antibiotics, what is the problem? Well, that we've addressed to some extent already between EFPIA and the Commission. What about CNS research? What about brain research? Do we do the right research here? Are pharmaceutical companies engaged or not? If not, what's the problem? Is it a regulatory problem? Is it a market failure? What is it? Scientific problem? So we need to have somehow the eyes must be on that ball. The end goal here is developing medicines that patients need and that some people are willing to pay for on top of it. So we need to get a realignment on these research priorities, and we're very much looking forward to using this report when it comes. So this is my final slide, and just to emphasize the need for us all in our excitement about the science, not to stop with that, but to think this all the way through so that this highway reaches the patient. So we need to think about all these guys down the line that need to be ready for our things. Let's bring them on board. Let's get them excited about the science. Let's educate them. Let's listen to them. Let's align expectations so that this is going to continue to be a flagship project of the European Union together with the pharmaceutical industry. Thank you very much for your attention.
So now we'd like to open the session for questions and comments. If anybody has any questions and comments, please find a microphone. Are there circulating microphones? There are. So just raise your hand. Please.
Just I want to know your point of view about the role that have to be do in small, medium enterprise in this kind of consortium, because we listened about the industry pharmaceutical and research laboratory institute, and very few about the small, medium enterprise. What do you think is the role of this new about the research European area? What is do you think it's important, not important? What is your opinion about it?
As I was joking before we came on the panel, we could maybe once or twice change roles in debates. I think you represented the industry view very well, Robert Jan, on that. Can I just basically emphasize what you said about when I talk to the small and medium-sized companies and also talk to my CEOs, indeed, the people see this as an ecosystem. And sometimes, historically, it was portrayed as some kind of tension, or big pharma versus biotech, or big pharma versus smaller companies, and it was some kind of competition, and the dinosaurs will die and only the small ones will thrive, or the other way around. In fact, everyone understands that we have to have both. Okay? And as I said earlier, my companies are deliberately embarking on a strategy of research and innovation, which is built on partnerships with small and medium-sized companies. That's also why we have in EFPIA a specialized group called EBE, and I believe Tita, who is the executive director of EBE, is here. And I mention that because you don't have to be a member of EFPIA as a company to benefit from being part of IMI or IMI2. Through EBE, there's a possibility for all sizes of companies to benefit from the partnership, and it's something that we try and promote as we go to various scientific congresses and so on. This is not that known. People think this is only for Pfizer and GSK, but it's not. Actually, there's no money at all to the big companies. The money is for academia and for small companies. I think Robert Jan mentioned venture capital. I think this is extremely important, because this is what I hear from entrepreneurs today, is that if it hasn't dried up, it's drying up in Europe. It's been bad for a few years and it's not getting any better. Okay, so venture capital money for life science is very difficult. And I've learned that the reason for that is that the uncertainty about many of these great ideas is bigger than before. And investors need certainty. They may have become more moderated in what they expect in terms of returns. Okay, maybe not 10 times the money, but 4 times the money. But still, they need to know, is this going to take 2 or 5 or 8 years? And is it going to be approved? Is it going to be reimbursed by someone? And some of these excited personalized medicine discussions we have about repurposing old off-patent medicines, any investor will know, well, who's going to pay for that? So the more clear development pathways we can show to the investor community, including our own pension funds, by the way, the more clear it becomes, the more predictable it becomes to deliver on the new science, the more likely it is that we're going to get money back into life science. So this is one of these other objectives that I hope we will get out of IMI2, is to lay the clear pathways for the new science to both reach patients and also then to get the investments to do it.
If I may just ask a question about the science for IMI2, the calls are driven by the strategic research agenda that you create. How do people input to the strategic research agenda if they're not part of the EFPIA mechanisms or not within IMI? How do people have a voice?
Well, we've tried to be as all-encompassing as we can, and I think you can appreciate that my research colleagues are out there a lot, okay, and talking about this at various scientific congresses and using all their contacts with advisory committees and so on. But it's not enough. I really appreciate the question, because then I can again say that we are really open for all the thinking, and we are also open, as I said, to be led in a way by organizations like WHO or other groups that actually point to where do we need to go. We're really open for that. The attitude in the industry has changed from we do our thing and we'll tell you later, to actually being out and about and open to that. So any input is still welcome on the SRA.
Okay, 2 questions, one here.
Yeah. Thank you, Manuel Gier, Biomodeling Systems. I'm an SME, and I would like to suggest 2 things to help SMEs to have access to these programs. The first could be, with a so bad success rate, maybe to change the way of evaluating programs, because we know that the consensus expert is something that kills disruptive innovation. Why not to create a specific track where the experts are not agreeing together? It means maybe that there is something new, and it's interesting to give a chance. The second thing is maybe to say that novel therapies doesn't mean necessarily novel drugs, because the SME, if you want us to have access, to develop drugs, this is less expensive and easier to do it. And in this case, SMEs, and we have now in my company done this, it will be easy to propose new therapies, and this gives first steps for developing, new drugs from these first therapies. In this case, we will accelerate the time to market in a lot of cases. But we need from the pharma industry and maybe also from the patents that the combinations are correctly protected and correctly valued by the industry as a first step to develop these new therapies. So these are the two ideas. Maybe for the disruptive innovation, 25% of the budget could be given to such innovation where people disagree completely, because this may be something interesting for SMEs. Thank you.
Richard, do you want to comment?
No, on the 2 points, on your second point, I agree with you that for scientists and also for the investors I mentioned, it's very difficult to see sometimes the different box or regulatory pathways. So for medicines, it's this way. You can only develop it in one way. And then for devices, it's like this. And for companion diagnostics, it's like this. And here you have some set of IP standards, and here you have something else. And what you're looking at is developing a composite idea, like a combination of MRI, some CSF test, and then some medicines patented or off-patented. And that's what you're looking at. And the development pathway is not there. So that's what I alluded to before, is that this is not thought through. There is no clear path. I have a lot of hope that our colleagues from the Commission, and I guess this is more your colleagues at DG Sanko, isn't it, now, who has the regulatory responsibility for all these things, development pathways, that they, in their report on omics, which we call it in a popularized version, I don't know what the official name is, but there is a report forthcoming, hopefully with concrete proposals about how all this can be clarified somehow. There needs to be a roadmap for 10 years on how this is going to be integrated in a way. So there's a lot of expectations from our side. And if it doesn't include that, we'll be very disappointed. I think you will be disappointed too. On the other point, I'll actually pass this question to Robert Jan, because I know that on product development investments or SME support for risky developments, there are some other very interesting programs in the Commission budget, hopefully, that can address that. IMI is really about partnerships. So if you're looking for the disruptive development models in very risky areas, I think there are other avenues and other facilities.
And another question here, please.
Heidelberg University. Earlier today we heard that there's a mismatch in the public perception of brain disorders and the economic cost and the burden on quality of life that it creates. And I wonder whether you see that this mismatch exists also from your perspective, whether it would have an effect on the coming Horizon 2020 program, and whether you think public education campaigns for destigmatizing mental disorders, destigmatizing chronic pain would play an important role in the next years.
Just since this session is on the wider European agenda, could we broaden that question to be destigmatizing diseases generally?
Of course.
No, we have an enormous amount of work to do there, not the least in brain diseases and mental disease. You're absolutely right. I mean, I'll share with you, and I know this is recorded, so people will remember this, but I was in a very interesting debate in the European Parliament where the European psychoanalysts had a congress. And it was a very interesting debate that suddenly erupted in between the profession, in front of me and some other people, the parliamentarians that were there, about whether you scientifically could document properly the effect of therapy, of cognition therapy. And there was so in this community there were two camps, very obviously. There was one which felt that they wanted to be held to the same scientific standards as all the other interventions, and therefore one should try and document therapy, psychotherapy, by using MRI and all the techniques to show a physiological effect of the therapy. And then there were other camp that actually dismissed all of that and said that that's all mumbo jumbo. This is more of an art. This is a craft, and And I think that's a debate which now has to take place in the healthcare community. So it's not only, we are researchers here and the industry is here. We need to take this new science and think about it. Or what does this mean? We need to work differently. We have to define diseases differently. Regulatory pathways have to change. But equally, there is as big a debate to take place and movement needed among the professionals. So all the physicians in the room here. I mean, this goes back to medical school about, what is the disease and then how do we explain this to patients, and it's actually back to biology, isn't it? So I know I didn't answer your question. I'm not sure where this fits in the EU programs, but I can just see that if we want to deliver on all this, that has to happen as well.
Does the question not speak to Mary Baker's point from this morning about the need to involve society more widely? I mean, she already applauded the involvement of society in IMI, but also made a plea for a greater involvement. No. So I think we'd all like to congratulate Françoise Grossetête for arriving. Sorry that you've had such problems in getting here. And so Françoise Grossetête is an MEP, and she has been an MEP since 1994. She's extremely active in the health arena, and I believe has twice been voted MEP of the Year in the health sector. And you were the rapporteur for the original legislation for the setting up of IMI. And so the others have already given presentations, so if I could invite you to give your short presentation now, and then we maybe have time for just one or two, please.
First of all, I would like to apologize for my delay. There is a strike, perhaps at Brussels airport, and my plane landed more than 1 hour late. I'm very sorry about this. I would like to thank Mr. Michel Goldman for this stakeholder forum. When I look at the achievements of the IMI projects that were presented here this morning, I feel proud to have been involved in the creation of this exciting initiative. Back then, a lot of people wondered if it would even work. Today, it's clear that IMI has achieved much in its short existence, as well as delivering scientifically excellent results that are set to improve the drug development process. It is provoking a revolution in the way pharmaceutical R&D is carried out, and is injecting new life into Europe's pharmaceutical sector. It is also contributing to the European economy by creating 1,500 new jobs, and this number is likely to rise as IMI's projects progress. Most importantly, the results of the projects will have an impact on the lives of patients. I'm struck by the fact that most IMI projects address disease and conditions for which there are currently few effective treatments. I was particularly pleased to learn about IMI's progress on Alzheimer's disease and autism, as these issues are particularly close to my heart. Meanwhile, IMI is also making important contributions to public health, for example, through its projects on antimicrobial resistance. At the global level, IMI's achievements mean that Europe is now recognized as a pioneer in the promotion of open collaboration in drug research and development. IMI has demonstrated the value of the public-private partnership model and delivered important lessons on how to run a successful PPP. With Horizon 2020 due to start soon, I and my colleagues at the European Parliament are very much looking forward to receiving the European Commission's proposals for a future life sciences public-private partnership. Moreover, I have to tell you that I would be very interested in being appointed rapporteur again for the next IMI too. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, so we are, thank you. We are short of time. If there is one question that somebody would like to ask, we could do that on this panel. Yes, please.
Thank you. One of the other flagships of the research program is EDCTP, the European Developing Countries Clinical Trial Partnership. And as I see that IMI2 is moving much more into the direction of addressing societal challenges, and on the other hand, EDCTP is moving more and more into the direction of working together with the private sector in PPPs. Do you foresee any possibilities of collaboration between the two partnerships or programs?
I can start. Yes, for those of you not familiar with this is a platform for building. If I paraphrase, simplify it a little bit, platforms for building capacity for clinical research, with the intention, of course, to not only develop medicines but also to leave behind, the infrastructure and the knowledge about clinical research and how that in turn will impact on the quality of healthcare and all of that. We all believe that people that are involved in clinical research are also better physicians. So there has been a memorandum of understanding signed between EDCTP and EFPIA just a few months ago, where we have agreed to take on researchers from around the world to come to our facilities in Europe and learn about good clinical trial practice and how to run clinical research. We see very much a possible extension of EDCTP under Horizon 2020 as something which is run absolutely in tandem with IMI2. I think probably the way to secure that coordination is through the joint ownership of the Commission and EFPIA, the same parties that will be involved. And I can promise you that if that should happen, EFPIA will be fully engaged, as we have now become lately with EDCTP. I know there were hopes many years ago when it started that EFPIA would be a full partner from the beginning. That didn't happen for a number of reasons. There wasn't the level of trust from either side or interest. I think now we're there. We're there to leverage that in a whole different way on the Horizon 2020. So I'm looking forward to discussing that further.
I think that has to bring us to the end of this part of the afternoon session. So may I first thank all the panelists and ask for a round of applause.